May it please the court. All it takes is a moment. Today, you will hear the story of Parker Page. Now, Parker Page, at 6 years old, is in a really tough spot. Her mother previously died when she was 2, and her father was now in prison for a drug trafficking charge. Now, 6 years later, Parker finds out that her father, Jordan Ryder, is taking her camping. And she's ecstatic. But this camping trip that Parker was looking so much forward to was cut short. Because today you will hear the story about the murder of Parker Page. Today you will hear the story about this murder done by none other than Parker's own father, the defendant, Jordan Ryder. Now let's talk about the defendant's history. You will hear today that the defendant had domestic abuse and drug trafficking charges in the past, that he was in prison for the latter, and even in prison he had a tendency to be violent. You will hear from the defendant's counselor that he was diagnosed with an anger management disorder. An anger management disorder that was not like a normal anger management disorder. You will hear about the rage blackouts that the defendant experienced himself. You'll hear about how these rage blackouts resulted in the defendant completely forgetting what happened in that blackout and realizing in the end that he had caused harm to someone. Now, the defendant gets out of prison. And like I said, Parker is extremely happy she gets to go camping with her father. But then, the defendant decides they should both go hiking. And Parker's not so happy anymore. Halfway up the trail, Parker seems to grow weaker and weaker. Because Parker's not an ordinary kid. Parker has osteogenesis imperfecta, also known as brittle bone disease, which is exactly what it sounds like. Her bones were so brittle, so weak, that with physical activity, going outside, hiking, climbing, her bones could snap like that. But the defendant won't take no for an answer. Halfway up the trail, Parker stops. She doesn't want to keep going. She realizes the extent of her physical ability, but the defendant doesn't want to believe this. The defendant gets mad. The defendant takes away his daughter's hiking stick and swings it at her from his anger, but misses. Later on, Parker realizes the predicament she's in. She doesn't believe in herself. She knows that she's too weak for this hike and keeps advising to her father that they should go back, that they shouldn't keep going. She has lived with this condition and she knows that she can't go on, and that's when the defendant starts to lose it. Parker grows angry at the defendant, starts yelling at him, and that's when he blacks out from anger because his own daughter is yelling at him. He experiences a rage blackout. For the second time that day, he takes away his daughter's hiking stick. For the second time that day, he swings it at her. But this time, he didn't miss. This time, he hit his daughter with the hiking stick, pushed her off a cliff to her death. As the state, we're bringing a charge of aggravated murder to the defendant, Jordan Ryder. Now, aggravated murder simply means that the defendant knowingly caused the death of another, in this case, his daughter, Parker Page. Now, as the state, we hold a burden today. We hold the burden that we must prove this to you, this charge of aggravated murder, beyond a reasonable doubt. That just means that by the end of this trial, you won't have a reasonable doubt that this did not happen. Now, this is the highest bar in Midlands, but I'm sure we will meet it because by the end of this trial, the evidence will show that all it took was one moment. That all it took was one moment for the defendant to take away his daughter's hiking stick. All it took was one moment for the defendant to lose control. All it took was one moment to swing that hiking stick and hit his daughter, causing her to fall to her death. Find the defendant guilty. Not for my sake, but for Parker's.